All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining today. And my name is Michael Speca. I'm the president of Ardalyst, and today we're going to be doing an introduction to cybersecurity for executives. To give you a little bit of background specifically on the presentation today, our goal here is really to provide an introduction and overview for business leaders who want to understand how to manage their cyber risk from a business perspective. So this isn't a technical class on cybersecurity, and it is an introductory level class. So we're going to be, or presentation, so we're going to be talking about some basics to help a business leader, especially in a small or mid-sized organization that doesn't have budget for a chief information security officer, for example, understand what they need to do to protect their organization. So we'll go through a couple common misconceptions about cybersecurity in general, things that really trip people up when they're trying to figure out what they should do or where they should start. We'll talk about how to get started with something, especially if you don't have anything formal in your organization at all. And we'll discuss the elements of a cybersecurity program. So as an executive or a business leader, you know where to start and you know what kind of questions to ask to get a cyber program in place. So after the session here today, you should be able to prioritize cyber resilience as part of your overall risk management plan. You should leave here with some tools for managing your cybersecurity efforts, and you should have a little more confidence in making decisions about how you're going to spend money on cybersecurity. A little bit of my background. I've been in the information technology field for 25 years. I started doing systems design, especially desktop system design in a network environment. So really some of the very early thoughts about how we protect endpoints is what they're referred to, but how we protect machines and end user machines against viruses and malware. From there, I moved into business applications, and so I've done business applications for the majority of my career, and I've come back to cybersecurity recently, which has been very interesting for me as both an entrepreneur and a business applications technologist in understanding kind of where we are as an industry and how you, as a business leader, can help make some of these decisions. So let's get started with misconceptions. There's a lot of misconceptions in the cybersecurity space, and there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the cybersecurity space. Obviously, big, well-televised hacks or well-reported hacks in the press, things like Target, things like Equifax, issues within the government, these all create a lot of fear and concern. Unfortunately, that fear and uncertainty translates to a sense sometimes that there's very little that can be done. As an executive, as a non-expert, when that's just not true. So let's dive into what some of these myths are. First of all, this whole notion of security, or that my system is secure or my system is insecure. For better or for worse, security in the digital space, cybersecurity, is not all that different conceptually than physical security. We can do all the same things in a digital space that we can do in a physical space. They just happen in a different way. So it's very difficult to say that a physical space is secure or insecure, depending on the tools and techniques and budget and capability of someone who's trying to breach physical security. They're going to be able to do it or not do it. One of the most common analogies of this is an 8-foot wall is secure until you have an intruder with a 10-foot ladder. Cybersecurity is no different. So the question isn't, am I secure or am I insecure? The question is, what sort of defenses do I have at my disposal? And where do I have vulnerabilities, and against what kind of risks? So if I am a bank, I obviously have a different set of risks than if I am a toy store, at least, perhaps a mom and pop toy store. And so it's important that as you think about what to do for your organization, you recognize that this is about improving your position, much like any physical security effort. It's about improving your position, not achieving security. Second misconception is that you're either okay or things are really bad, right? There's this duality between I am safe, I am protected, I am secure, nothing bad has happened. and I have been hacked, and therefore all is lost. So the anatomy of a security incident or a security event looks a lot like any other risk that you might encounter. There's the possibility of it, there's the probability of it, there's the fact that it might be underway, and I have the opportunity to mitigate that risk, to repel that attacker. And then you get further and further to the right on that list. So now people are in my network. Now people have gotten their hands on information that I don't want them to have. Now people have taken that information out of my network, and now they can post it online. There are other kinds of attacks besides obviously the exfiltration of information, the stealing of information. Those are more denial of service attacks that either that make it difficult for you to do business, that shut down your ability to do business. And so again, those attacks march down a pathway from not happening to in the middle of it to bad things have happened. And it's possible to defend yourself in the middle of those kinds of attacks. There's another myth out there. This is my favorite when you look at sort of any imagery around cybersecurity. There's usually some picture of a person in a hoodie and they're hunched over a keyboard, and there's matrix-like streams of data going by them. And so there's this idea that cybersecurity is extremely complex, and unless you are armed with extremely sophisticated technologists, there's nothing you can do. The fact of the matter is a lot of quote unquote cybersecurity issues or cybercrime is ordinary fraud. And it's fraud that's perpetrated by gathering information about you and your organization and using that information to trick people into doing things that they shouldn't do. For example, a customer of ours contacted us. They actually contacted us to become a customer of ours because someone got enough information about them to know that they did business with another organization, and they sent a fake email to that company's accounts payable person, used her name, used the right name of a requester, and said, "Hey, we've changed our bank account number. So when you pay us from now on, please deposit the money to this bank account." That person trusted the email. They changed the bank account information in their payment, and they didn't discover that they had been tricked until several months later when their vendor called and said, "Why did you stop paying us?" So this didn't require a lot of sophisticated technology to launch this attack, and it doesn't require a lot of sophisticated technology to defeat that attack. A policy and training to make sure that you verify changes in payment information or requests to spend money would have done the trick there. And so a lot of these fraudulent activities that trick people into clicking on links or changing bank accounts or sending money where they shouldn't, buying gift cards, the reason why attackers use them is because they work. And not enough of the population really understands and has been trained to not fall for those kinds of things. So there's an awful lot you can do without having to necessarily, get into the cloak and dagger, hoodie matrix world. And sort of the last one, which is related to the complexity, is this myth of the unattainability of security. And this is something that I think the industry actually perpetrates. Way more so than it should, and the spirit's in the right spirit, because security professionals, I've heard them say over and over again, we have to be right all the time, and the adversary, an attacker only has to be right once, and there's a perception around that really you're just never going to get there. You can always be had. And the fact of the matter is that there are organizations who are successful against repelling attacks, and at advanced levels, there's organizations that are successful at fighting through a hack. So they don't need to be, final events. That it is definitely possible to improve your situation, and it is definitely possible to live through a bad day, to live through some sort of attack. So as you as an executive are thinking about, okay, I got to get my hands around this cybersecurity thing, I urge you to reject the binary in the language that you'll find in the industry. There is no thing as completely secure, but it is possible to achieve a certain amount of resilience. There is no thing as completely safe, and likewise, the possibility that you are in a situation that cannot be resolved is also unlikely. What's important is that you're managing your risk at the right level. So let's talk a little bit about how to get started. And I chose this image of a marathon kicking off deliberately because really that's what we're talking about. This is not a one and done. I ran through a security project and now I'm secure. I turned some things on. I had my IT team flip some switches and now we're great. Much like this idea that security or insecurity, it's not a binary thing. Security or cyber resilience, like any other risk management, is a practice. How often am I checking on where I am and making sure that I'm in the right place? How often am I looking to see if something went wrong? Much like you would never think about your physical security as installing cameras without paying somebody to watch them, your digital security is no different. There is an active portion of your security, and as you mature your practices, which is another thing we're going to be talking about here, you're going to need to iterate from the point you're at today to a better place, to a better place, to a better place. And so think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. On the other hand, that doesn't necessarily mean it's really hard to understand or necessarily even do. So to try to keep this simple, we've broken putting a program together into basically three simple steps. And the first step is really to choose a baseline. And you might be asking, so what do we mean by a baseline, and what am I really choosing? And the fact of the matter is that cybersecurity, while it's getting more and more attention, is certainly not a new phenomenon. And there are lots of organizations out there that have built a baseline of what you ought to do to improve your cyber resiliency in your organization. So you don't have to come up with the whole recipe book. You don't even have to pay someone to come up with the whole recipe book. You can go out and look at different standards and choose a standard that works for you. The standard that we're going to be using as a bit of an example in today's talk is the CMMC, which is a standard that's being adopted by the Department of Defense to help protect their supply chain. And we're using that one in particular today because it has a maturity portion to the program, which really would help you as an executive recognize that, hey, I can go from where I am today through a series of levels to get to the place I want to be. I don't have to do it all at once, and I can think about it in different stages. CMMC is by far not the only one. There's a government standard that CMMC is based on, put out by NIST. It's typically referred to as NIST 800-171. They have other standards about how to think about cybersecurity. There's a commercial one called the CIS Top 20. When you work with your either your internal IT team or you work with your vendors, point is that you can start from a place. You also may have to start from a place if you're in an industry that has regulations, much like defense contractors looking at NIST and CMMC. There may be a standard such as HIPAA or GDPR that governs some of the things that you have to do. So you might as well start there, but that's just the baseline, right? So that's just your starting point. Once you start there, you really need to look at your organizational maturity and the risk that your organization bears. And the reason why you do that is because there's a long list of things that you need to do in many of these standards. And again, if you abandon the myth of I am secure, I'm not secure, what you're really trying to figure out is, how do I move the ball, right? How do I move the ball as efficiently as possible? So where are we as an organization and our ability to implement the kinds of controls that we need as an organization to meet our regulatory requirements or to help protect our data and our business operations? Risk is a really interesting part of that because, again, it's not binary. A law firm that predominantly does personal injury cases inside the US has a different risk profile than a law firm that primarily advertises as a firm that can help organizations do business overseas, right? Those are organizations that have different risk profiles because they're dealing with different situations. So where are you in your business, both in terms of who might be paying attention to you and what it is that you're trying to accomplish? So another great example of that, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, is what a lot of us have been trying to accomplish with the coronavirus pandemic, which is to figure out how to do our business remotely, right? I'm doing this presentation from home, and the need to move my operations to something that's distributed means that I've opened up the organization to a lot of opportunity. Also, I've opened up the organization to some risk. So how can we take advantage of that business transformation? How can we achieve that business objective while lowering the risk? So it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and you need to know where you're trying to go as a company to pair your risk mitigation steps with your business objectives. Once you've made that decision, you're going to pick a set of solutions and you're going to ask people to implement them, right? Whether that's your own internal IT team or an outsourced team, you need to go ahead and put those things in place. And once they're implemented, you need to go back and assess, right? And this is the iterative maturation process. I put something in place. Now I've looked at it. I've seen how well it's working. I've seen what kind of risk it's helping mitigate. I've got new business objectives. I've got some of those solutions that might not be performing to the level that I need them to perform to. We've become more mature as an organization and ready to take on more. So is it time again to do a new implementation? Again, from a leadership perspective, you don't have to understand every nut and bolt and bit and byte and switch around these things. You need to understand the concept so you can ask the right questions. So let's talk for a minute about maturity and try to make that concept a little clearer for you. So this is the maturity model as published by the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense at the Department of Defense, that's responsible for authoring the CMMC model. And really here you can see they've broken up and provided some details, but they've broken up the practice of cybersecurity, for lack of a better word, into these 5 levels. And the first is we do stuff, right? We perform cybersecurity. So we have a list of things, a couple are documented, but for the most part, we're going out and doing some of the things that we ought to do. In level 2, we start writing things down. We've formalized our policies. We've said, you should do this, you should not do that. And the practices that we have are also documented. So we've decided, for example, how we're going to keep track of people coming in and out of the building, or coming in and out of our server room, or logging into our systems. And we are doing other things around what's referred to as our cyber hygiene that we've written down. When we get to level 3, we've documented all of these practices. We have policies that cover them all, and we've got a plan. So in addition to doing some things ad hoc and writing some things down, now we've got management framework around our security plan. When we get to level 4, we've added review. So now we're testing ourselves, right? So we're seeing if we're effective. And when we get to level 5, now we're going to optimize based on those reviews, and we're going to be able to expand the accessibility of the documentation, the accessibility of the practices, and we've got a continuous improvement process in place, right? This is an extremely high-level summary of what's required in CMMC. The important takeaway from today is you can see the progression from, hey, we do things in an informal way, to we've got a program that is reviewed and iterates and is optimized. And much like any other effort that you would have to manage as a leader in your organization, or the leader in your organization, this is not an unfamiliar process, right? You start off by, let's just make sure people get out there and get some things done. And then you start working on repeatability, and then you start working on scalability. So now I've written down how to do it. Now I've got other people doing it, and I'm watching to see if it gets done right. And now we're taking the feedback for watching from what we see when we watch, and we're optimizing that feedback. So let's take that concept now and start talking about what a program would look like. I'm a big fan of Southwest Airlines and Herb Keller. He's obviously a well-reported manager, and I just thought this picture was perfect because again, we're trying to demystify some of the elements around cybersecurity here. So yeah, you have a plan and you need to go do things, right? And so as a leader, the thing that you need to do is understand what it is that the organization needs to do, and then make decisions about how those things are going to get done. And so at Ardalyst, we've broken this down into 6 program elements. So if you asked us to come help you put your program in place or run your program for you, we would look at it across these 6 spheres. The top 3 are sort of what we consider the critical activities, and then the bottom 3 are supporting activities. So let's walk through these one at a time and discuss what's included in each one. So again, our 3 core activities are governing, what we call govern, harden, and defend. Governance, having a plan, having a policy, making sure that your people do the right thing. Hardening, making it harder to get into your systems, and defending, which is protecting your systems in the event of any sort of attack or incident. So let's drill into these a little bit more. So from a governance model, this is really where a lot of your role as an executive in the organization is going to come in. And we'll talk about the things that you specifically need to do towards the end of this presentation. Suffice it to say that especially with a number of these regulatory baselines that we talked about earlier, there's a requirement from an auditor or from the governing body of that approach that you have documented practices and that you're managing that. If you think again about organizational maturity around cybersecurity, first we start by saying we're going to do some things, and maybe that's where you start. You say, hey, we've got to get some things in place here. We're going to get some technology people to come help us get some things in place. We're going to move to a cloud platform that includes some security out of the box. So at a minimum, you're going to write down what it is that you're going to do. As you evolve from there, you're going to say, well, here's some policies. Here's some things that I've signed as a leader of the organization, or I've approved as the leader of the organization that says you have to do these things. These things are conditions of employment. They're conditions of operating our network. They're conditions to logging onto our network. So we're not going to share our passwords. We're going to audit how many people have administrative rights on our machines. We're going to have a sign-in sheet when people come into the building. We're going to have a sign-in sheet when people enter our server rooms if we're not in the cloud yet. We're going to keep track of who signs in and who signs out of our machines. We're not going to use USB storage because it's easy to compromise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of things that you may or may not choose to do. Getting those yeses and nos into a policy and into a practice, and then again, continuing to mature that. Now maybe we've got review cycles, we've got tests, we've got validation systems that we're using to give us feedback, right? All those decisions are part of your governance model. And a big portion of your governance model is going to be compliance with any regulation that you might be subjected to. But I encourage you to go beyond thinking about compliance with regulations, because compliance is just a checklist, right? It's not maturity. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a much better state that you were in before. It just means that you can check some boxes. And if you're really interested in achieving the objectives of a good cybersecurity program, you're thinking about how you can put business capabilities in place in a risk managed way. And that's really what governance is about. So are you doing the right things? That's the easiest way to sum up govern. Let's talk for a minute about harden. Harden is what most people think of immediately when they think about security. When I was involved in desktop design in the late 90s and early 2000s, and we were talking about security, what we were really talking about is hardening systems. We spent a lot of time patching vulnerabilities, which is a lot of what harden is about. So vendor says, hey, we've detected a security issue, or someone made us aware of a security issue in our software. Here's the patch, deploy the patch, right? Let me scan my systems and see which systems aren't up to the latest and greatest, and let me get them up to the latest and greatest. That is really about, the security professionals will talk about decreasing your attack surface. How many different places can an attacker try to get in, right? What we're going through right now, a big expansion in remote work, is opening up organizations to more attack points. And so a lot of the work to be done in hardening is, well, now that we've gotten this new business capability in place that everybody needed to get to in a very short period of time, how do we go back now and find those holes and start closing them? So that's what hardening is about. And this is where that duality of I'm secure, I'm not secure comes from. And the answer to that duality is defense. So defend is the active part of your resilience profile. Defense is all about watching for behaviors that seem strange. So if I see that you, as the president of your organization, who lives and works in Texas and has no travel scheduled, is logging in from Thailand or Germany, that's weird behavior, right? And now how can I, as a security administrator on your system or a security analyst on your system, see that behavior and stop it? I'm pretty sure you're not where that login's coming from. I better stop that login. I better get you on the phone, confirm that you didn't take a trip that I didn't know about, and make sure you have access to your systems in a secure way. That's one of many different kinds of examples. I like it because it's relatively easy to understand without needing to know all the technical jargon. But that's an example of something that doesn't look right. And we don't have to know everything about everything to see behavior that doesn't look right and try to intercept that behavior. And so when I said earlier that there's a misconception that you're either secure or insecure, or you're either safe or you've been hacked, there's a whole space in between there that defenders can see and act on. So there's your three major elements in the system. Are we doing the right things as an organization? Have we looked across our options? Have we picked the best options that are right for us? Are we complying with our regulatory requirements? And are we doing what we need to do to advance our business objectives? And now in a secure way. And now, when I go to do that in a secure way, in a resilient way, we're looking at it from two different sides. One, how can I make it hard or harder for somebody to attack us? And two, if we see things that might be attacks, how can we stop them? And beyond that, you don't have to know all of the details of what those things mean. You can expect people who are talking with you about the decisions you need to make to help qualify what they're doing, to help harden your systems, to decrease the likelihood that an attacker will have a place to attack, will have a point that they can try to compromise your systems, and then defending your systems when that event happens. Okay, so let's drop down to the other three. These are related. These are related to the ones above them. Like I said, they're supporting activities. So transformation, digital transformation is a thing in its own right. You could go to an IT consulting company and hire people for a digital transformation project. Why is it here on this slide about cybersecurity? Well, because when it comes to governance, it's really the opposite side of the same coin. When you're trying to decide what to govern or what to defend, what to harden, how to handle your cyber risk, what you're really saying is, these are the business objectives that we have. And how do I go after those business objectives in a way that's risk controlled, risk mitigated? When I first got into this business in the late 90s, I had a boss. We were talking about getting on the internet. We were talking about giving clients access to their deliverables from a download instead of us having to print 12 copies and bind them and ship them off, and then hear that they wanted more and make more and charge them for printing and all that kind of stuff. So wouldn't it be great if they could just download their tech? I know it's a very old example. So that was the business objective, right? The governance model that a number of people who had the internet was brand new. So one of the policies that they considered was, well, why don't we just unplug the internet connection and then we can plug it back in when someone calls and says they want copies. Now, keep in mind that people called all the time and said they wanted copies. So the fact that they would pick up the phone and say, hey, I need 4 more copies of that presentation wasn't that crazy of a thing to expect them to do. Obviously, that level of hardening, well, we're just not even going to hook it up until someone asks, limits business transformation, right? It limits our exposure to other things we could do with the client if they could get to us in an always-on environment. Obviously, today the situation is much more complex, but it's the same idea. If I want to do business digitally, if I want to be able to work remotely, how can I enable new capabilities, innovative capabilities, online scheduling, online meetings, online transactions, in a way that is risk managed. And so you should always have your transformation in mind. The other thing I'll add about transformation is many times it is easy, especially if you're in an older technology environment, to get more secure by going through a business transformation. So we're Microsoft partners. Microsoft has great new technology in their cloud offerings to increase security, to help you govern, to harden systems, and to give places for defenders to go get information on how to defend you. And by moving to that environment, you also open up a lot of business capabilities. You open up more opportunities for secure remote work. You open up more opportunities for remote collaboration, lots of different capabilities in the Microsoft Office suite. That transformation creates security. So two sides of the same coin. Operations. So you see we've represented Operate here with a call center representative. We think about Operate in terms of that, in terms of help desk, in terms of system administration. There's the right way to do things and a wrong way to do things when you're administering a system. There's a way that creates more risk or a way that preserves your risk mitigation profile. So when you're thinking about your cybersecurity program, you have to think about who is the person that we call when the printer breaks or when we can't log in or when our system doesn't work. And do they know how to restore service without compromising the security that we put in place, without reducing the hardening that we've done? And so just be aware that you should be asking questions about your operation. Validate is exactly what it sounds like. We need to test our hardening and our defense to make sure that they work. And if you go back in your mind to that maturity profile, reviewed was, I believe, level 4 of that maturity profile. So I've made my decisions about how to do the right things. I've implemented those things. I've documented how I'm going to do it. Now, how do I know that it works? So there's lots of different ways, big and small, you can do security validation, from what you might have heard of as penetration testing or red teaming, where a group of folks who are good at breaking into stuff come try to break into you and your environment. That's the big, complicated, people with the hoodies and the matrix type stuff. But if you go back and think about risks, probably the bigger risk is somebody going to send you a fraudulent email. And there's a way to validate your organization against that. You can test to see how many of those fraudulent emails get through, and they definitely get through because criminal organizations are good at writing them. And then you can test your organization's ability to recognize them and not click. Going back to my first example, you can teach your organization not to change that bank account code without picking up the phone and calling your vendor and saying, hey, we got this message from you that the way you wanted to receive payments changed. Is that valid? Is that a real message? And so you can do that testing. It doesn't have to be expensive. And for an organization of the size you may represent, that might actually be your biggest risk and your best spent dollar for validating your organization's security posture, the decisions you made with your governance. All right, so those are the 6 ways to think about the program. Let's talk quickly about your role in all of this as a leader, because I promised when I started out here that you don't have to understand the ins and outs of all of the details of this stuff. It's understanding these program elements, understanding what maturity means. So how do you step in and make this happen? There's really 3 main things that you need to do. 1, you have to recognize that as the head executive in the organization or a senior executive in the organization, you have decisions to make. And you should expect your providers, your CISO, your IT folks, your company that's helping you with this, to make you aware of what those decisions are and the impact to those decisions. You're also making the decisions about what to do when people don't do the right thing inside your organization. So when people violate your policies. So I attended a meeting of about 15 CISOs, chief security officers, and chief information security officers, and they had a discussion about what the HR policies are when they do that validation and they test email susceptibility. And what do you do with the person who always clicks on the bad email? What do you do with the person who always falls for it? How do you manage that person to either get the training they need, be removed from access to risky information or be managed out of the organization. That's a business decision, right? That's not something you can leave to the IT people. You also need to be making the decisions about the business direction that you're going. If you don't set business priorities for your security team or your security outsourcer, and if they don't engage you in that conversation, then there's really no limit to the amount of money they could ask you for, because they're just trying to secure against every possibility. And we can't narrow down what those possibilities are without understanding what it is that you're trying to do. So again, if you're a bank that's trying to do a certain kind of transaction online, that's a different risk profile than if you're trying to set up curbside pickup at your mom and pop store, or you're trying to help someone who runs a hair salon be able to take appointments over the internet. They're two very different risk profiles, right? Once money gets involved, you've got something going on. So you're gonna need to know which decisions you need to make, what strategy you need to set. The second thing you need to do is know enough about your requirements that you can delegate them out. And this is really about holding someone accountable to say, I don't think that that decision rises to the level that I need to make it, but I am entrusting you to make it, to give me the recommendation, right? Ultimately, you're the accountable party. There's another big thing is about delegation, which is really about reinforcing the right behaviors. So if I'm delegating to folks that they need to own part of their security plan, then I'm indicating that that security plan is important. And there's a little asterisk that I want to put next to this, which is that executives tend to be the first person in the organization to ask to have the security controls removed. Well, sure. I mean, who would you trust more with your information than you? The thing that you have to recognize is that you're also the easiest target. You're the biggest target. And so the more you say, hey, turn this off for me, the more you're undoing the program for everybody else. One, it sets the wrong example. And two, you're the place where an attacker is going to start, because they are betting on the fact that you have access to just about everything else. So decide to do your program, buy into your program, make the business decisions you need for your program to work. Expect the people who are implementing your program to talk with you about this. Delegate parts of that program to others in the organization so they recognize the severity and the seriousness of what you're doing, and so that they can get bought in to understanding this relationship between the business decisions that you need to make and the risks that you need to mitigate. And then you got to inspect, right? Your provider, again, outsourced or internal, should be able to tell you, well, these are the things that we need to do. Maybe it's part of your compliance scheme, or maybe it's what you regulatory compliance scheme, or maybe it's part of the business decisions you made where you said, hey, we're going to go into this area and we need to do this in a risk aware way. And so these are the measurements that we have to let us know if we're doing a good job, right? So much like any other thing that you need to lead, you need to make the important decisions, and you need to expect people to either educate you or go out and get the information about what the impacts of those decisions are. The stuff that doesn't rise to your level, you need to make sure happens. So you got to give it to other people to do, and then you need some metrics to know if you're doing it. That's really what it boils down to, and it's not significantly different than anything else you would need to manage that you might not be an expert in. All right, so I've mentioned a lot about providers. I do want to throw out there that we help organizations get these programs in place. It's what we do. And it's really expensive to build all this capability if you're under 5,000 people. A lot of times there's just a handful of folks in IT, and for good reason. They're high cost individuals, and managing the career growth of IT people inside your organization is not what you specialize in, right? So you're going to want to turn to some sort of provider or a number of providers, and just some advice on what to have that provider be capable of doing. They need to understand your business. They need to understand the regulatory requirements that apply to your business. They need to be able to scale with you. This is a journey. It's a marathon. You don't have to have everything in place on day one. So they need to be able to say, yeah, we can meet you where you are here, at this level where you are, at this level of capabilities that you are, at this budget that you can afford to allocate to this. And we're going to help you over time continue to mature, continue to grow. They need to understand what's going on in the world of the adversary. So this is what's referred to as threat intelligence. And there's lots of different kinds of threat intelligence. We'll get into that in a later briefing. But make sure that they understand that what you should be doing pairs with the threat, which is based on the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Not say, well, here's the laundry list of all the things you have to do, and we can't really prioritize those for you. And last but not least, if something bad does happen, you want people who will be good at fixing it. And so they need to have access to those capabilities in the event that something does go wrong. Because again, it doesn't mean you're doomed, right? It means that here's an event that we need to fight through. Here's the thing that we're trying to manage is happening, and how do we as an organization continue to operate, continue to succeed, despite the manifestation of that risk, just like any other risk that you manage. All right, so we've covered a number of things here today. We've talked about the myths that muddy the waters for decision makers like you. This idea of duality, this idea of I'm secure, I'm not secure, I'm okay, or everything's a disaster. This idea that everything's too complicated for me to understand, and this idea that eventually I'm going to get had, and therefore I really should just roll the dice and not worry about it. Here's how you get started, right? Pick something that's already out there. You don't have to start from scratch. Pick a baseline, probably based on the regulatory requirements that your organization already has to meet. Figure out where you are and being able to meet those things. And being able to exceed those things, and then make sure that the investment you're making into your solutions is based on the priorities that you have. Understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You can mature your organization over time. You don't have to have it all on day one. The market changes, what adversaries are doing changes, what you as an organization is going to change. You're going to continue to grow. When you're evaluating what it is that's inside your program, recognize that you have to set the rules and make sure that you as an organization are doing the right things. So you got to decide what those are. That's your governance. You want to make things hard to attack. We refer to that as harden. A lot of people, that's what security means, or at least meant in the industry in the past. It's an active game, right? So we have to defend ourselves against things that occur. We need to defend ourselves on attacks, because like physical security, there's no way to put a lock, an impenetrable lock on everything. Consider your business objectives, and as you put technology in place, as you go through transformation, think about that transformation in a risk-aware way. Make sure that the people that support your organization understand how to support it in a security-aware way, and test yourselves. Right? Again, don't have to do it all on the first day, but that's how your organization matures. It matures along these 6 axes. As a leader, your role is not different than it is in any other way that you lead parts of your organization that aren't things that you have direct expertise in. You need to make sure people tell you what the key business decisions are, and that you inquire about the decisions that go behind your policies, so that you can drive the right business outcomes. You can make the right decisions about how your organization wants to operate. 2, it's your job, as always, to reinforce the right behaviors by 1, making sure the program applies to you, and 2, making sure that you delegate the decisions that you don't want to make to others and hold them accountable to making those decisions. 3, you need to inspect progress. You should expect to get a report. You should expect to get metrics. You should expect to know what those metrics mean and be able to see when you're doing well and where your organization needs help. If you're armed with that knowledge, you can manage your own internal and outsourced resources to help decrease your cyber risk, right? To lower the probability that something's going to go bad, and to increase the chance that if something goes bad, your organization will come out of the other side of that. So if you'd like to know more, please get in touch with us at Ardalyst, www.ardalyst.com. Appreciate you coming here today, and thanks very much for your time.